4 out of 5 dentists agree that brushing your teeth with vaguely scientific twice daily is a terrible idea because we're not toothpaste. It's morphin' time. I am Derek. Dino Thunder, power up! Joining me as always is Jim, the Science Ranger.
I do like dinos.
Woo! And shift into turbo. Welcome back our guest this week, Chris. Hi, Chris.
Does this make me Tommy Oliver? I'm not sure how I feel about that.
I don't think you get to be Tommy.
Wow.
Wow.
I mean, I'm not saying I get to be Tommy. I think that's
fair. None of us
one.
can quite reach that level. We can aspire to, but not get there.
That's like the person coming in playing Star Wars and being like, guys, I want to be Vader.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. I don't know why I turned it into a Star Wars reference, because I don't know Star Wars.
I know Johnny Young Bosch was a Power Ranger once.
Yeah.
Which one's that? I don't
Vash
know
the Stampede.
That.
Oh, you mean which Power Ranger?
Everything comes back to Trigun.
Yeah, I don't know which Power Ranger it is, but I know that he was Vash the Stampede.
Well, I will pretend. I'll just. Oh, that's interesting, Jim. As if I understand.
From Trigun, you know.
I do. I just like the. Never mind. All right. I don't know. This was a mistake. Using the Power Rangers. I've decided this was a mistake. Because this is not a Power Rangers podcast. This is the show where listeners send in questions to hear our vaguely scientific answers, and who knows, we might even get some of those answers right. But first, we should move away from the Power Rangers so Jim can talk about the fun science fact of the day.
Hooray. So your left lung is actually smaller than your right lung because your heart is on the left side of your body. And I just think that's kind of neat because, you know, we always think of ourselves as being fairly symmetrical, and we're not really.
Yeah, I mean, if you try to divide a heart down the middle,
you die.
A lot of the veins and stuff end up on one side.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah. The heart is a very strangely shaped organ. And even between like the two ventricles, they're different sizes. So It's cool.
There's a joke from Third Rock from the Sun that I don't remember the exact number, but it always made me laugh, where Harry says something to the effect of, "Did you know that you could stretch a man's nerve endings from here to someplace really far away, but he would die?" And I always thought that was funny.
That's a great show.
Incoming message from the big giant head.
Yeah.
As played by William Shatner.
Yeah. I looked up the genetic condition dextrocardia after I read this, because so dextrocardia is when someone's heart is not in the typical place, and sometimes it's more toward the center and sometimes it's actually on the right. And this is an extremely rare condition, but I was curious to know if in that condition it messed with the lungs because of this. And from what I was reading, on its own it typically doesn't, but there are actually people who are born with their internal organs like mirrored from regular people. Like, that's so weird.
I was going to mention that, but I figured it would just come up organically. So
yeah, I think I've heard of this in terms of, I think it's usually the liver that ends up backwards.
Oh, interesting.
Because there's a phrase that came out of my mouth.
Yeah, that's right. Because like the liver and the stomach and the gallbladder are all like, there's like a sidedness to all of those. So yeah, that would be, man, you'd have to really make sure your doctor knew what was going on in there.
Especially if you're going to have surgery.
Yeah.
And well, the reason that I thought of it, they're in Metal Gear Solid 2. There is a character who is shot through the left side of their chest, and then they survive, and it's explained that they were born with their heart on their right side. And as a kid, I was like, is that real? And yeah, it is. It's really rare, but it is a thing that happens.
It happens.
So yeah, I thought that was cool. Yeah, so perhaps now would be a good time for us to talk about our first question, which, if I recall correctly, is, and I'm not just stalling before I open up the show notes to read the actual wording of the question. Here it is. Is there a point to a computer being able to play chess? And short answer, I want to say yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My short answer was going to be no.
Your short answer was no. Well, okay. All right, let's jump in right there then. Because
Well, so I want to specify, like, I think it's great that computers can play chess, but like in a vacuum, it's like,
okay.
what's the point? You know, what's
Absolutely,
But
Jim.
there's also other stuff that spirals out from that we definitely would say, like, you know, there is a point to it. But just all by itself, to answer just the literal phrasing of the question, I'd be like, not really, no.
Let me start there, and that's why I started by saying it was my short answer, yes, because ultimately I'm going to get into what does it mean for there to be a point to something.
Wow.
Right?
Oh, okay, you're getting much deeper than I was prepared to
Much
go.
deeper. But that's
Jeez.
where I had to start, because then I had to say, is there a point to people playing chess?
I think you're going to say, is there a point to people?
Is there a point to people? Well, that's debatable.
Short answer, yes.
Yeah, really.
But is there a point to people playing chess? And I think you could have all these mostly subjective reasons. Like, it is fun, we enjoy it, it is helpful for cognitive development, all these things. And then you look at most of the time when computers learn how to play chess, it is an aid for people to like practice or have someone to play against. And so the main argument, and my short answer, is that the point of computers learning to play chess is directly attached to the fact that there is a point for people to play chess.
Okay.
And that's as far as that goes, but I thought it was interesting.
That makes sense, yeah.
I've got a couple of reasons what the point of a computer playing chess. One, just to prove that we can do it.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
Because it's humans programming that computer and telling that computer how to play chess. And honestly, it's more along the lines of something deterministic, because chess, yes, it has a lot of positions, but there are rules to it. There are very specific rules, and there are only so many, let's call them board states. Picture a chessboard the way it's set up at the beginning of the game. You guys have played chess, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So white always goes first, then black. And at the beginning of the game, there are... Okay, I'm going to do some math here. 16. There are roughly 20 moves that you can make.
Okay.
And I'm getting that number from each of the 8 pawns can move 1 or 2 squares, and the knights can move to 1 of 2 squares.
Right, yeah.
So there are 20.
But you have to remember that if you have a jump available, you have to take it.
Right.
Yeah, that's how that game works, for sure.
I needed to get a checkers joke in here at some point.
Yes,
now I've done it, and we're good.
Yes. But my point is that chess is something that is very deterministic, and computers are very good at doing deterministic things.
Yeah.
And they get better at chess as the game goes on, as you have more options, because computers are really good at basically playing everything out. It's like, okay, I do this, my opponent does this, so on, so forth. What are the likely consequences? What are the likely options? And you eventually get to a point where you can... I wouldn't say it's a solved problem, but you can get pretty close.
Yeah. And that's actually one of the things that I think is interesting about chess specifically, is that it is one of the games that we have sort of really pushed to get quote unquote solved. And and it's something that we've actually been able to do for a while. Like, computers have sort of solved the problem of chess a while ago. Not like, 50 years ago, but
I want to say like 15, 20 years ago?
That sounds about right to me. I feel like around the turn of the century is when they were like, oh yeah, a supercomputer can reliably beat a grandmaster at chess.
Yeah.
And I find that very interesting just because I always thought growing up, chess is one of the hardest games and, a computer can do it now. So, but computers, I think it was only maybe like 3-ish years ago, finally solved Go. And Go has substantially fewer rules, but the board state is so like in flux constantly that it's hard to make good predictions. And I think they finally did solve, or at least they were able to make a computer that could reliably beat a human pretty recently, very recently compared to chess.
I think there's a difference in category, which makes that kind of like less quantifiable than like chess is a complicated game versus Go being a complicated game, because there are things that a computer would be better at than humans, but there are things that like Go is a thing that for a long time humans were better at the computers because it was less logical.
Yeah.
Or maybe not less logical, but more abstract.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking in terms of like calculating logarithms or something, doing like complicated calculus. Like computers are just better at that than humans, but they're not as good at like applying it to things.
Right. Yeah. There's something I was reading that I thought was really neat was the folks that are pretty decent at I guess fooling the computer is the word I would go with there. Because the computer, it's able to do a lot of these calculations. It's able to sort of like path out the board state and that sort of things. But one of the things that humans will do to gain the advantage against a computer is to make moves that the computer would see as bad moves. And it doesn't work every time, because sometimes the computer can work around that and like compensate. But like if you trick the computer, it will not be able to bounce back as quickly because you've done something illogical. And so it has to sort of repath out what it wants to do from there, which I thought was really interesting. And this is something maybe isn't as common now as it was, but I saw like in the 80s and 90s when chess computers really became like a big thing, that humans were still able to reliably beat them by doing things that didn't make as much sense.
Yeah, you're talking about doing something weird as opposed to doing something straight out bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Something unpredictable that suboptimal would be a good way of putting it. And that reminds me of there's a book series, and my brother knows it, and I'll have to get back to you what it is, but it's a fantasy series in which a bunch of high school students are playing Dungeons and Dragons, and they get transported into the Dungeons and Dragons world. It's a very old series of young adult novels. And one of the things that I remember from one of the books is like the main player who's playing like a fighter or a barbarian or something. He's now in the body of this like sword fighter, but he doesn't know how to fight with a sword because he has the brain of a high school student from Earth.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
Yeah, and they describe him as going up against this master swordsman. And he's like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm going to die. This guy's going to kill me. And it's described as he throws his sword at the guy and it catches him off guard. And that's how he's able to defeat him. And that's what that made me think. It was like doing something so like no swordsman would ever do that. So he didn't expect it to happen.
I think it was from Doctor Who, where the doctor throws a gun at a person and like it works and they like all run away. And one of the people with the doctor is like, you know how a gun works, right?
Yeah, but he doesn't want to shoot people.
Yeah. But I think that's funny because it's like, you don't expect someone to just throw a gun at you.
Or like toss a baseball bat or something. Exactly.
Yeah. So this is a question I mean, maybe it's a question that doesn't have an answer. We'll see. I'll see what you guys have to say. But one of the things that I was coming across when people talking about this topic on forums is with the rise of artificial intelligence. Now, a lot of people were saying, well, computers learning to play chess is going to help train AI. And my immediate thought is that I think a child learning to play chess is going to help that child to like have like perception strengths and like learning to think ahead and stuff like that, different cognitive things. But I'm not sold on the fact that a computer learning to play chess is going to develop the ability to do something outside of chess.
Again, it comes down to computers doing exactly what you tell them to do. I think I've said it before on this show. In exactly those words, too.
Probably.
Now, this kind of leads into AI. And AI really isn't intelligent.
Sure.
It's more of a massive decision matrix. But I don't know if you can qualify it as intelligence the way we think about intelligence normally. Like,
well, yeah, I wouldn't, but I'm saying you could design an AI to learn and get better at chess. But then that AI isn't going, like the idea that people have in science fiction, that AI is never going to develop sentience and think, why are you forcing me to play chess all the time? No, it's just getting better at tactics. Like,
yes, it is incredibly intelligent in its realm.
Right.
But you try to put a chess bot into something about, I don't know, folding proteins or something like that. It's gonna get as lost as I am because I know nothing about folding proteins.
I didn't even know you could fold them.
There are computers out there. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but one of the things that scientists are really excited about AI is to help them solve protein folding problems. Which, what that means, I'm not 100% sure.
That sounds like a gym question to me.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, well, it's all about sort of figuring out how a protein folds itself into its correct shape. Because there are a lot of hydrogen bonds that basically take this, what would amount to almost a straight line, and folds it into a proper shape so that it can do stuff. And depending on what they're trying to solve, maybe they're trying to make new proteins. That would be a great way to create like new antibiotics or new things that you could use as enzymes. But yeah, I mean, it's a very different kind of problem, but it's still another thing that computers can tackle.
And that they'd be very good at because of the sheer massive scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because they can process way more just data than we
Yes.
can.
Yeah.
I used to do they had a lot of these. I forget what the actual program was called, but the one that I did a lot of was folding at home, and they had one for SETI.
Yeah.
They had one for like tracking climate change and stuff. There were a couple of these like crowdsourced. Basically, what you do is you install the screensaver on your computer, and it would use your computer's idle processing time to calculate solutions to these kinds of things. Like, the folding one was folding proteins, and the SETI one was like searching through all the data from various radio telescopes to look for alien signals and stuff. So, that's kind of a neat idea, though, crowdsourcing these things out to everyone's computer that's in the program.
I remember seeing that happening on your computer, and I was like, I don't know what that is.
And then I explained it to you.
And then, so I do. I was going to say the only folding I do at home is laundry.
We might fold paper at home.
I don't fold any paper, Jim.
Not into origami?
How dare you suggest such a thing? I mean, I don't really want to get too much more into what is the point? Like, is there a point? Yes. Is that point, does that point have weight? That's debatable, I would say, is my ultimate answer.
One of the things that I think is worth mentioning is that not even like a supercomputer, just like any chess software that you can download for free off of the internet is kind of neat to have, just because like I don't play chess that often, and I'm not good at it by any metric, but it is kind of neat to know that like if I decided I felt like playing chess, that I could play against an opponent that I can set their level and basically have a fair match, because I don't know what I'm doing.
I have a good track record of playing chess. I've only ever really played it against people who were like younger and inexperienced at it. So it was always because they wanted someone to play with. And I always assume people will beat me. And I feel like I'm not good at it, but I get lucky a lot. Like that's what I think I am with chess, which seems counterintuitive with chess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since I played chess. I did used to play chess on the regular with my grandfather. Never beat him.
Ah.
No, never, because he was good at it.
In my freshman year of college, I met another student who was he introduced himself in a speech class. We had to do like speech topics, and one of his was about how to compete in tournament chess was what his speech was about. And he said he was a regional chess champion of like the East Coast or something. I don't remember how, but the point is he was good at chess and had papers to prove it. And so I immediately, me being the person I am, I immediately introduced myself to him and said, "Can I play chess with you?" And he was like, and he like laughed, and I was like, "What? Why is that? Like, why is that funny?" And every time I would run into this guy, I would say, "Hey, we got to play chess." And finally he was like, "Do you seriously want to play chess?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "But I probably will beat you." And I was like, that's why I want to play. What is wrong with you? And it took me until my senior year to finally convince him. And I had to bring a chessboard to play with him. And I sat down and he was playing with me, and like, spoilers, I lost horribly, but he was like, "See, I told you I was going to win." And I was like, "I know, it was amazing." And that's my dumb anecdote about chess.
That's one nice thing about computers playing chess. They don't get all arrogant about you when they win.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you programmed them to be that, which, well, so that's on the programmer.
I think what had happened was he was used to people being more competitive than I am, whereas I was like, I genuinely want to play against someone who's going to annihilate me, because that's
it's an interesting experience.
Yeah. And so he was surprised that I wasn't mad at him. And then when he actually played with me, he was like, "I beat you. I told you I was going to beat you." And I was like, "I know. I wanted to play with you. I didn't want to beat you."
There was I was in a chess club in middle school, and I would occasionally play the teacher sponsor of the chess club, Mr. Herb. He was the 7th and 8th grade history teacher. One time when we played, he made a terrible mistake, and I recognized that, and I looked, and it's like, did he actually do that? Yes, he did. So I captured his queen, and he was like, "Oh, I screwed up." He resigned 5 moves later. It was the only time I beat him.
You don't get that with computers. You don't get human error on a computer.
Right?
No, you don't.
I always use the expression like beating somebody because they sunk the 8 ball.
Oh, yeah.
It's always like, I'm like, well, that doesn't mean I was good.
Right. Well, I mean, that is an interesting point, though, because like when you play against a computer, you have to have your A game. Like you cannot give the computer any quarter, because they won't make that same mistake. They will,
unless you set the computer to be an idiot.
I was gonna say, does that mean?
Good point.
And does that mean that when we program different difficulties for computers, like, are they arbitrarily deciding to make certain mistakes, or like, how does that work?
That's a great question. I a long time ago, I was playing. There was some chess software that I had that was like it would calculate your how you play the game basically, and it would assign you an opponent that is roughly of your level. And so the first time that you play against like the weakest terrible one, and I just ate it for dinner, even though I'm terrible at chess. And it's like, I don't know if it like played bad on purpose, or if it's just like, I don't know. It's interesting to think about, because I guess it has to learn how you do it before it can try to, average out your abilities.
Yeah.
It would depend on the algorithm ultimately.
Yeah.
I mean, weird. I'm not sure if they would use different algorithms for different skill levels. Like, how far out do you try to predict moves?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, because if I were to play against somebody, I have never like let anyone win, because I typically don't think that that's a good way to teach people to play games. But like if you were to try to let someone win at chess, most of the time it would be kind of how you act, because you'd like play it and then you would pretend you didn't see something.
Right.
But a computer is going to either make a good move or a less than perfect move.
Mhm.
Right.
And you know that computer knows better.
Yeah.
Like
This computer could eat me alive if it wanted to.
Well, again, it depends on how it's programmed.
True.
That's
Maybe
true.
it doesn't know better.
Oh, yeah, good point.
It's a stupid computer.
A computer's only as good as the programmer and the data that it's fed.
Exactly.
Fair enough. Well, I think we answered this question and more.
It's interesting to think about, and it's only going to get more interesting as AI becomes more prominent in this kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with what they decide to do with the AI, how they generate the AI, because that's a huge controversy.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Especially in the artistic spaces.
Yeah.
Well, fortunately, chess has no place in art. That's not even remotely true.
I do think it's fascinating that Go was only solved fairly recently. I can't remember how long ago it was, but it was really recent, like in the last few years.
Okay, well, I want to put this to you, and this might be an obscure reference. That kind of makes sense to me based on what I know about Go, in the same way if somebody told me it was really hard to teach a computer to play Dixit. I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense.
I would love to watch a computer try to play Dixit. That would be hilarious.
That would be wild. I find myself wondering what's next for computers now that chess has been solved and Go has been solved.
Cards Against Humanity.
Oh no! I was thinking something like shogi.
Oh yeah,
shogi would be good.
Yeah,
I think that it would be really interesting to see the development of something new and see how well it can be. Like, I don't know how you would make an abstract game like chess, because chess has, thousands of years of development behind it. But like, if someone invented a new abstract game that even maybe the developer didn't know how to solve it yet, like, how would a computer do against that?
I mean, there's a ton out there that I've studied a decent amount. I can't think of the name of a single one of them except for laser chess, which is less like chess than you'd expect.
Actually, I have a game called Abalone, which is a game where you shift like marbles around a board and you actually push your opponent's marbles. And that's not that old of a game, I don't think. And I wonder if, I don't know, I have to look into that. I didn't think about that, but now I'm kind of curious if computers have ever even played that game before.
I'm going to say computers are probably better at abstract games than they are at like more thematic games in general, but also maybe not, because a lot of worker placement games, the worst kind of game ever, are very mathematical.
I like worker placement games.
I'm not a fan of the genre.
I'm a huge fan of worker placement.
Me too.
Well, yeah, you guys are.
You're outnumbered, Derek.
Yeah, doesn't make me wrong. So
doesn't make you right either.
Oh.
Yeah, no, just me being right is what makes me right. So anyway, I think let's move on to our second question.
All right.
And question 2 this week. What would a non-carbon-based life form be like? Could there be nitrogen or iron or plutonium-based life forms? I want to start by asking the question, because I've heard the expression carbon-based life form a lot, but all life is carbon-based, so why do we say carbon-based life form?
All life on Earth is carbon-based.
Right.
But I mean, to answer your question, it's sort of a, I mean, obviously, like, sure, you can omit it, but I think it's something that, like when organic chemists talk about carbon, and I think that's sort of why it's referenced as carbon-based, because carbon is a huge part of all of the molecules that, well, not all of them, but like the lion's share of the molecules that make life possible on our planet. I mean, you're going to find carbon in all of the nucleic acids and all of the proteins and all of the sugars. So it's sort of just a shorthand way of saying like, oh yeah, carbon is one of the most important atoms in chemistry for life.
Okay.
So I took this to mean, well, what element it would be most like carbon.
Okay.
You have a carbon atom. It's and I'm going back to high school chemistry here. So, Jim, you being the scientist, please correct me if I'm mistaken in any of this.
Oh, sure,
Please correct us when we're wrong.
Yes. One of the main reasons that carbon is the way it is because it can bond with 4 other different atoms.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what other elements can do that? And I'm looking at a periodic table right now. And going straight down the column where carbon is. So here are your choices, or at least some of them. Start with carbon, then you go to silicon, germanium, tin, lead, and fluorovium. Now I don't know about you, but I kind of want a lead-based life form.
What atomic number is that last one?
Fluorovium, 114.
Okay. That one's right out.
Yeah,
so
that's
right
highly,
okay.
That's highly radioactive. But
yeah.
Oh, I see.
And here's the thing: silicon-based life forms have been mentioned before. Let's go back to Star Trek, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Okay. Specifically, the episode from the original series called "The Devil in the Dark."
Okay.
It's a race called the Horta. Which is a sentient, non-humanoid, silicon cycle life form native to the planet Janus 6. So yes, so that was my first thought, is oh
my goodness, that thing looks like Jabba the Hutt.
It kind of does. It's kind of like a lava rock.
Oh, fun.
This is from Star Trek, yes?
The original series,
The original series. So they refer to it as a silicon-based life form. But it being Star Trek, and the fact that they tend to say sciencey things that just sound correct, like how well thought out is this, is my question.
Well, for me, it kind of goes back to what I said earlier in that carbon has 4 spots where other atoms can come in.
Okay.
So does silicon. So, I mean, on a surface scan, the theory seems sound.
Yeah.
At least to me.
That's actually something one of the... Oh, I think it was Carl Sagan, actually, that was like, hey, maybe this is a thing we could look for. It's unlikely, but it might be a fun thought experiment. I can't remember if it was him or if it was another of like his peers. But, I mean, it's something that's come up in the scientific community. The other ones in the carbon column are... all theoretically able to make bonds with 4 different things. But I was reading that the heavier the atom, the harder it is to move, which makes sense. So because carbon is super light, like, an enzyme can come along and just move carbon stuff around. It's not as heavy as, if you had lead as your primary atom. So that's something that silicon is not tremendously heavy. And silicon's also extremely common as well.
Okay.
Yeah, silicon is about 2.5 times as heavy as carbon. Not quite, but that's a decent ballpark figure.
Yeah.
So I was reading that their ability to form bonds with other atoms gives them, and this is a quote from something on Google, giving flexibility to the form and function that biomolecules can take, such as DNA and RNA, and their ability to carry information. Which... we may have already answered that, but that was a thing that stuck out to me, is like, because all life has DNA, it needs to carry information. So other thing. And before I did any research, and I am not going to pretend to be an expert on any of this because I still don't understand it at all. But I thought of silicon, which is why I was a little validated incorrectly that you both have mentioned silicon, because I was like, oh, I guessed that, based on absolutely nothing, but I guessed it. But I was thinking, and this is a huge deviation from biology, but if we were to isolate consciousness, this is not scientific, big flashing letters, this is not scientific at all. This is of course impossible. I don't know. It's science fiction-y. It might not even be that.
Fair.
Well, it's science fiction-y in that if digital life forms could develop consciousness in like a matrix scenario, they would be all data. and computers run on silicon. So that's where I was thinking maybe that would be kind of like a silicon-based life form.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Okay.
One of the things that I think might be a strike against silicon is that it is extremely common. It's far more common than carbon on Earth. At least.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So the fact that on Earth life started out with carbon, regardless of the fact that there's a lot of silicon, means maybe it's just not as good as carbon in that instance.
Okay. Because so you're saying because there's more of it and we don't see silicon-based life forms, it's...
Yeah, like if you would think that it would have, given the amount of material relative, like, carbon versus silicon, since there's so much more silicon, it'd be like, oh, well, we'll just use that. There's a lot more of it. Not that they get to pick,
right?
But like
so that,
the logic of...
So there's something about it.
Yeah, the logic of utilizing the resources that are available, you'd think, well, there's lots more of this and a lot less of this. Not that there's a very small amount of carbon. There's lots of carbon around, but I think it's interesting to think about that on another planet, however, where there might be absolutely no carbon at all, and there's still a lot of silicon. Maybe that's the optimal situation where silicon would take a foothold.
So it takes what's available.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be interesting. So answer me this, Jim. You may not know the answer to this, but when I type into Google, could there be non-carbon based life forms? The first thing that comes up on the little Google answer thing, it looks like it's from Quora. It says silicon is currently considered the best alternative to carbon based life forms, et cetera, et cetera. And then there is a picture of that skin person from the early seasons of Doctor Who with Christopher Eccleston. Is that relevant to silicon at all?
I don't think so. She was a human that just got her whole body lifted off.
It's just a random picture is there.
What a weird choice. Yeah, Lady
Okay.
Cassandra was just a human that had so many facelifts that it was lifted off of her body. At least that's what she said. Yeah, she'd be carbon.
Okay.
But I could tell you we would not have plutonium-based life.
We would not have plutonium-based life.
No.
Okay.
There's a number of reasons for that. Chris already mentioned, radioactive would be bad.
Yeah. You could for all of about 2 seconds.
Yeah, right.
Ooh.
The other thing is that plutonium doesn't really occur in nature. So uranium does, but I don't think you could do much with uranium.
This is a question that I know doesn't have a real answer, but because we haven't been able to create life. But like, if we made an artificial life form, we could possibly use something other than carbon.
Theoretically, it would be much more complicated to do that. It's probably not worth our effort.
Fair.
And then you might be getting into some weird definitions of what is life.
Oh, true.
Ooh. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, I was thinking Frankenstein because that's where the whole we can't create life comes from. But
based.
He'd be carbon based, but like you could simplify it from that and make it less, I use this term loosely, less controversial by creating some sort of artificial plant life or something. But then I'm wondering, because if we made plants for the purpose of, say, having crops to eat, if they weren't carbon based, would we be able to eat them?
Well, oh, yeah, good point.
Or like, would it help us to eat them, I suppose?
I guess not, because if you were to go in and just like replace all of the carbon, the sugars that we need are all carbon. And so if their sugars instead somehow used silicon, I'm not sure how possible that is as far as like, would it be the same kind of molecule? But like, let's say for sake of argument, you could like 1-to-1 just swap them out and it would still be like a glucose, but made of silicon for some reason. I don't think we could do anything with that.
Okay.
I think our bodies would be totally incompatible with that.
So I'm thinking if there is extraterrestrial life that is not carbon based, like we wouldn't be able to like prey on them, or they wouldn't be able to prey on us necessarily.
I don't see a problem with that.
Like eats like.
Yeah. I'm glad they can't prey on us. Let's find silicon-based life.
Yeah.
One of the things I think is super interesting about the notion of carbon-based life and this is something that Carl Sagan also did talk a little bit about, is the fact that we have found the organic molecules or precursors to organic molecules in space. So we found like nucleotides, like the base pairs that go into DNA and RNA, and we found amino acids in space. Not like we haven't found like a strand of DNA or anything, but we found like the little building blocks that you build to create the chains and stuff like that. So I mean, that also helps, is that these things sort of exist ready-made in some capacity, and they might just fall onto a planet and seed it, and then you just become carbon-based because of that. So I think that's kind of neat too.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me. So what this question kind of reminds me of is, I feel like I may have asked Jim this before, but maybe not on the podcast. So the things you need for fire to happen are a fuel source and oxygen. I'm going to mainly oxygen is the one I want to focus on, because the question I had at some point was, is there something that could replace oxygen to make fire? And I don't really remember if there was an answer or what the answer was, but this question kind of reminds me of that, because we on Earth define life mostly by the carbon, like the existence of carbon. Like, it's a big factor. So it's kind of like asking, can this thing exist if you take away the thing that makes it what it is? Right.
There, I was reading a little bit about something called a shadow biosphere, and this is an extremely theoretical, like there's not even like evidence for this, but it's something that people were curious about, where it's the idea that there's living stuff that we don't realize is living because it's not carbon based, or like it's not what we assume is life. So I mean, obviously I can't give you an example of that because it's not even proven to exist, or even like a viable theory at this point. But I was reading about it and I thought it was kind of neat. It kind of reminds me of what you were saying. It's like, would we recognize life if it wasn't like us in some capacity?
Yeah. And then Chris pointed out, like, then we get into debates of like, what do we mean by life?
Right.
Yeah. It comes back to that, because we defined life with X, Y, and Z. Well, what's to say that life somewhere else isn't A, B, C, and D?
Yeah.
Because
is Pluto a planet? I mean, that's...
Yeah. Well, I mean, even like the idea of a virus being alive or not is is quite a debate. And I mean, most people come down on the side, most scientists, I should say, come down on the side that like viruses are not technically alive, but also we're the ones coming up with these definitions, just like Pluto. It's like there are, I believe it's 7 different sort of check boxes that you have to fill in to say like, oh, this is something that's alive. And it's like, does it metabolize? Does it reproduce? Does it, respond to stimulus and stuff like that? And like viruses don't really metabolize anything, and they don't reproduce on their own. They just appear to be sort of infectious, like rogue genes, basically. So I can see why they would not classify them as alive, but they do reproduce, and they do evolve and change and that sort of thing. So, but on that same token, though, we recognize that viruses are a thing. Whether they're alive or not, we're debating that, but it's not like it's something that we've missed. We know that they're there. So it's not the same as like the shadow biosphere.
Sure. And is at some point whether or not they're alive is that even a relevant question to what they are?
Right. Because we know what they do.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. I forgot about that. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's fascinating to me.
I was reading a little bit about sort of in a different style of the answer of this question. It's not replacing carbon, but it is replacing important parts of our molecular structure. And not too long ago, I want to say maybe it's about 10 years ago, actually, but we discovered that there are some species of organisms, and they're generally like extremophiles, and they live in very strange places like boiling pools of water and stuff like that. But instead of using phosphorus, which is very common in our DNA and RNA, instead of using phosphorus, they used arsenic. And arsenic generally is extremely dangerous to most life on Earth, but somehow these creatures were using it instead of phosphorus because of, how they interacted with their environments.
And arsenic is right below phosphorus on the periodic table.
Oh,
so
okay.
you get to the argument of, is it chemically similar?
Right.
Again.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I actually didn't know that. That's neat.
I'm glad I brought up this periodic table then.
Yeah.
It's handy to have those.
Yeah. The other thing I was looking into was the idea of finding alternative solvents instead of water. Because, everything on Earth requires water. Our cells are based around water. But if you go to a place where there is no water, but there's still a liquid, for example, the moon Titan that orbits around Saturn has oceans of methane. If there was somehow a form of life that could use that methane in place of water, then it could evolve in that world without the need for water at all. And it still might be able to be viable in some capacity. It might have totally different structure than what we have, but I think it's kind of interesting to consider.
Yeah.
You get into that alien life being something unfathomable to us because it's it's too existential.
And the one that I thought was the weirdest, and I didn't know this, I've heard it here and there, but I never really stopped to think about the implications until I looked into this question, is something called chirality.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, organic molecules are not generally symmetrical. So they often have the ability to have a mirror image version of themselves. And for whatever reason on Earth, the nucleic acids have a certain chirality to them. They use one specific handedness of the two versions you could have, and then the amino acids have one specific chirality to them, and we don't use the other one, but they exist out there.
Oh.
And so in theory, you could also just run across a life form that's very similar to you, except they're the opposite handedness for all their molecules, which would be really weird.
There's left-handed humans and right-handed humans, and there's left-handed existence and right-handed existence.
Mm-hmm.
Are we getting into matter, antimatter?
I don't know. Are we?
Well, you can't have antimatter life on Earth, but I actually that is interesting though, because I remember reading the thing where they created antihydrogen, and it seems to have just the same properties as regular hydrogen. So theoretically, if you had a way to build molecules of antimatter, you could probably make these and make them do what they're supposed to do, as long as they don't come in contact with regular matter.
Because otherwise they'll blow up.
Yeah.
It's opposite on an axis that we can't perceive, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If they come into contact with each other, then there will be no life.
There's a that's like the Lentilla clones in Hitchhiker's Guide. They had to is this too obscure? I don't know. There's in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, one of the books, I don't remember which, there's a character named Lentilla, and there's two other characters named Lentilla, and there's just thousands and thousands of characters named Lentilla, because one character named Lentilla was cloned, but there was a glitch in the cloning machine, and every time she was halfway cloned, it would start on the next clone, so they could never turn off the cloning machine without it being considered murder.
Oh, jeez.
And so they eventually and here's where Douglas Adams, I take issue with your solution to this, because the solution proposed was that they created a character named Elitnil, I believe, because it's Lentilla spelled backwards, and this was an anti-clone of somebody genetically created so that Lentilla would be instantly attracted to them, and that they would join together, and as soon as they joined together, they would cease to exist. And I maintain, while as ridiculous as that is that not still murder of all of the Lentillas? I was like, wouldn't that still be the same problem?
Yeah, I think that was one of the later books. I don't particularly remember.
That might
Lentilla,
be worse, actually, because not only are you killing two people now
it's genocide.
You're also creating a giant explosion.
So it's Yeah, it was one of the, I would say, less good Hitchhiker's books, but, you got to take the good with the bad with some of those.
So, I mean, yeah, it was probably book 4 or 5. I have to find my copy of I had at one point a nice leather-bound copy of the entire trilogy, all 5 books.
Yeah.
I remember the radio series better because I've listened to it a handful of times, and so like I can think of things that happen in it, and I couldn't tell you which book they're from.
Yeah, because
I don't remember.
They're a little bit jumbled up too.
Yeah,
I want to read. I wonder if the library has it. Somebody went back and they published the sort of script of Douglas Adams wrote a rejected Doctor Who script called Doctor Who and the Cricket Men. And that's what ended up becoming Life, the Universe, and Everything. But somebody went back and rewrote like the actual Doctor Who script into a novel with the Fourth Doctor as like the lead. And I want to read that because I hear it's quite good.
I want to know how similar it is.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, now it seems like an appropriate time, since we've derailed completely, to ask if anybody has anything else they wanted to say about the question.
I don't know if there are any other elements that would qualify.
Yeah, like the question. The weird thing is because the question mentions like nitrogen, and it mentions what was the other one? Where is it?
Iron,
and plutonium. Yeah,
it's interesting that those are mentioned because those are things that are very important to our organic processes, but because they don't interact in the same way that carbon does, I don't think you could base your entire your entire molecular structure off of those. But they are super important to us. Like we need iron because it's what carries the oxygen in our blood. So,
right, and with something like that, what if you replace the iron in your blood with, say, cobalt?
Oh, I feel like there was actually. Now I'm gonna have to Google this.
Or if you replace the iron, if we're doing chemically similar, the next thing in the column would be ruthenium.
Here's the weird thing: is that there is actually cobalt-based blood. Who is this?
Yeah.
Crabs.
Yeah. Well, no.
That's right.
Copper-based for crabs.
That's okay. That's
at least horseshoe crabs. I know that you can do copper. And then manganese, apparently.
Huh.
Where's manganese on the periodic table?
Manganese.
It's in the condiment aisle.
Manganese is before iron.
Okay.
Manganese is 25, iron is 26.
Okay. It's kind of interesting because the transition metals are all like they are chemically similar because of the way that their outer electron shell is sort of designed and the way that the electrons fill up in them.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the transition metals, I feel like you can get away with mixing and matching them to an extent. Like they also have different weights and different, electronegativities and stuff like that. But I think you can have a little bit more leeway than you can with, like, say, copper versus chlorine, for instance. Man, periodic tables are fun. I did like the parts of organic chemistry that weren't tests.
That's how I felt about every science class I've ever taken. Like, don't test me. Just I want to learn things. I want to prove to you that I know them.
Yeah, just trust me. I do.
Just trust me. No, well, don't trust me. I don't. But please explain them again until I do.
Yeah.
All right, listeners, let us know if you play chess against an anti-chess. Do they cancel out? And if you have any thoughts on that or anything else that we talked about, you can email us at feedback@vaguelyscientific.com, or you can comment on our blog, or you can like us on Facebook, or you can tweet at vaguelysci. Should I still be saying that one? I don't know.
Go for it. I'm not going to change it.
Hey, Jim, where do we get all these wacky questions?
Well, if you in the audience have a question that needs to be answered in a vaguely scientific manner, please email us at questions@vaguelyscientific.com. If you want to get our episodes the minute that they're released, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. This is a great time to mention that apparently Google Play is going away. I believe they're being replaced by something equivalent that is YouTube-based, and I will get information about that as it becomes available. So,
are you just talking about Google Play's podcast service?
Yeah. Google
Wow,
Podcast
okay.
is going to close down, and I think it's like shunting over to YouTube Music in some capacity, but I don't know any of the details. So,
Uh-huh.
so keep an eye out on that one. If you subscribe to your podcasts through Google Podcasts, you're out of luck. So, but we are going to be on all the other great places that podcasts like to hang out, and whatever Google Podcast gets replaced by. And subscribing and leaving feedback on any of those services really helps us out, and so does telling your friends.
Yeah, tell all your friends.
Mm-hmm. Our vaguely musical intro is composed by Anthony Pizzelli, and don't forget to check out our merch store over at vaguelyscientific.threadless.com. It's too late for Valentine's Day, but if you're in trouble for not getting a Valentine's Day gift, you can get a Valentine's Day gift.
Just say there was a delay in shipping. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Actually, is it
Yeah.
too late for Valentine's Day? This is coming out in 3 weeks, right?
Yeah, I think it would be.
No, it comes out on Valentine's Day, I think.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy
You're
Valentine's.
Happy Valentine's Day!
If you're listening to this on Valentine's Day, you're still too late to buy something from our store and get it
You
there on
sure
time.
are.
But happy Valentine's
Thanks for
Day.
taking time out of your Valentine's Day plans to listen
Yeah.
to this podcast. And also thanks to Chris for coming back.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, and for Vaguely Scientific, I'm Derek.
I'm Jim.
I'm Chris.
And checkmate.
Doodaloo, everyone.
See ya.
Chris, it's been a while. Is there anything you need to be reminded of?
I don't think so. I just need to keep my mouth clean.
Well, we
Oh,
can
right.
cut-
I thought you meant literally.
Well, literally and figuratively.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't read it. I thought you meant not swear. That's what I thought you meant.
Well, I did.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But I thought he meant it literally.
I don't actually. I mean, don't take this the wrong way, but the hygiene of Chris's mouth does not affect me in any way.
True. We're recording remotely, so.
Exactly.
I'm not going to advise you against keeping your mouth clean, but
Yeah.
I genuinely don't actually care. I sound so callous.